What's up, y'all? My name is J-Dub, and today I am talking about Puss in Boots, the three Diablos, and why you should care about it. And also why it ties in to Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, and the rest of the Shrek universe, and Puss's character as a whole. So, most people, when they see this short at first glance, they think, oh, it's a ton of cute little cats! Which is very valid, but also it has a lot of deeper meanings. And if you know me, I'm going to overanalyze the crap out of it. So let's get right into it. I'm going to just kind of break down what happens in the short if there are any of you who haven't seen it. And then I'm going to talk about why you should care about it. So basically, Puss in Boots, this takes place right after the first Puss in Boots movie. And he lets us know immediately. He says it's following his adventures with the Golden Goose. And he says that he is at a crossroads and he doesn't know whether he is an outlaw or a hero. And he is riding through the desert when he is stopped by these guards who capture him. They take him to their princess, Princess Alessandra Belagomba, and she says that she wants to hire him to find her ruby that goes in her crown. And she says that the guy who stole it, this guy named the Whisperer, they've captured 3 of his henchmen, and they're the only ones who know where he's located, but they won't tell them where he is. So Puss, saying that he fears nothing, he goes down to this dungeon where they are keeping these henchmen. And he goes inside the cell, and it's these 3 little cats instead of what they call Diablos, little devils. And he says to them, will you help me in exchange for your freedom? And they agree, but when they get out in the desert, they take all his stuff and throw him in a hole, basically immediately, because they are little Diablos, little devils. And so they run away. They're walking through the desert. Puss gets out of the hole. He corners them and ties them up and says that, you're going back to jail forever now. And he says that your mother is going to be very disappointed in you. And then he realizes that, like him, these orphans, these cats are orphans. They have no mother. And he says that he tells them a little bit of his life story. He says that he's an orphan as well, and that he was betrayed by his friend, who is an egg, callback to Humpty Alexander Dumpty from Puss in Boots. And he says that they need somebody to point them in the right path, and that he can do that. So he frees them, starts teaching them combat techniques. And then the next day they go to find this Whisperer guy. They do find him. They find his hideout. And he is very angry, obviously, at the 3 Diablos for betraying him. And Puss fights him. And this is the important part. We're going to come back to this in a minute. Puss almost dies. He is hanging on the edge of a cliff with the Whisperer about to strike him and knock him off. And the Diablos are the only ones who can save him. So they do. The Whisperer falls off the cliff and dies. Puss and the Diablos get the ruby back. They take it to the princess. And Puss has trained the 3 Diablos to become palace guards, which he gives to the queen. And then he rides off into the desert again for another adventure. And that is the 3 Diablos. So let's break down everything that happened here and why it is so important to Puss as a character. So this short showcases 3 things that are very prominently on display in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. And they are fear, vulnerability, and commitment, all found within the character of Puss in Boots. So first, let's talk about the element of fear in this short. So immediately when Puss is hired by the princess, she says that his reputation is of a cat who fears nothing. And he agrees immediately and says that says once again when they're going down to the dungeon that he does fear nothing, but then immediately becomes frightened when he sees the shadow of the Diablos resembling some kind of horrifying creature in the dungeon. And this is really important because the Puss in Boots, the central franchise, would have you believe that the Last Wish, his encounters with the wolf, is the first times that he's felt fear in his life, but he definitely feels genuine fear in this short, and he also feels very vulnerable at times. Also, when the Diablos, take his stuff, tie him up, and throw him in a hole, he says, "This is very bad for my reputation." And he has established this reputation over the years of a cat who fears absolutely nothing, but then these little Diablos have succeeded in getting him in this vulnerable position, and he is feeling actual fear for the first time, I believe, in this short. And he's a little more vulnerable than we see him in the first movie. He still opens up in the first movie, and he still feels some semblance of fear, but in this short, we really see that on full display. And then the next thing I want to talk about in relation to The Last Wish is vulnerability. Puss in this short really expresses himself, and we get to see peaks of what his character is going to go through in The Last Wish, and this ties in as well, this short, with his commitment issues. In this short, Puss has to look after these three Diablos, and for the first time, he is becoming like a father figure, and this may be tied into the fact that growing up he didn't have a father figure, but he does not really know how to handle a situation where he has to care for these three Diablos. Maybe that's also why they're able to overpower him so quickly, but he's obviously very unfamiliar to this situation, and he is vulnerable in, the way that he can't really handle parental responsibility. And eventually he does, make peace with the Diablos. He trains them, and he does become a bit of a father figure to them, a bit of a mentor, but for the first bits of the film, he is definitely not suited to the role of fatherhood. And then this also connects very heavily to The Last Wish, and I believe even what happened to his relationship with Kitty at Santa Coloma. I think one of his fears when he walked away from that church, and obviously in The Last Wish he confesses to Kitty that he was afraid. I don't think, though, that it was just of commitment to her. I think it was of commitment to starting a family and having to raise kids of his own. Maybe he thought of the three Diablos because he calls them his kids in boots at one point, and he probably thought, he was reminiscing on that adventure, and he thinks, I can't do this. If I have kids of my own and I have to raise them, I'm probably going to mess it up royally, so I'm just going to, walk away from all this responsibility, because Puss also is, a legend, and he has to, in his own mind, he has to live up to that legend. And he says at one point in The Last Wish that, the legend got so big that there was no room for anybody else. And once again, I don't think that was just referring to Kitty. I think he was referring to future kids he may have had. Maybe a life of adventure and swashbuckling was not the life he wanted for his kids if he was to have them. And he thought that he would just be an irresponsible and unsuitable parent for children. So he, he couldn't deal with the commitment of starting a family with Kitty, and that is why he left that church in Santa Coloma, despite his deep love for Kitty, and also other than the fact that he was afraid of being committed to the relationship with her as well. So another point in this short where Puss shows vulnerability is when he's talking about his backstory very briefly to the three Diablos, when he tells them that he's an orphan as well. And he talks about Humpty from the first movie. And for just a moment, you can see just this immense pain in his eyes, like just for a second as he's recounting this story. And I think that this is just kind of a cycle of trauma, like his character development and his problems, his issues with himself are all due to his past, his fear of commitment, his running away from every situation, and he opens up to the three Diablos, and you can just see the pain in his eyes, like, knowing what he's gone through, knowing what happened in the first movie. It's like his best friend betrayed him, and then was his friend again, and his sibling, and then he lost him, and that was the last kind of, like, family that he had. And Kitty isn't there in the short either, so at this point in the franchise, you know, he's kind of all alone. I mean, obviously Kitty's somewhere off on some other adventure, but Puss is definitely feeling alone, and he's feeling, you know, lost. He's probably still grieving over Humpty's death, and he's probably trying to hide it from other characters, but I mean, I'm sure that he's really grappling with, you know, losing Humpty, who was such a prominent part of his life in his earlier years. And basically this all just ties together in Puss displaying fear, vulnerability, and commitment issues. And then the last thing I want to talk about is that Puss, with the Whisperer, in the fight with the Whisperer, that Puss actually almost dies. That's right, the wolf wasn't the first one to very narrowly avoid killing him. And then also Jill in the first movie, I suppose. But the Whisperer, basically, they fight. The Whisperer disarms him, gets the sword away from him, and then knocks him onto the edge of a cliff. And he is literally like 1 second away from dying, and then the Diablos come in and save the day. And then also in this scene, you can see real fear in Puss's eyes. Like, not the level of fear that he obviously feels with the wolf when he interacts with the wolf for the first time and he gets cut, because in this case the Whisperer doesn't make him bleed, but we do definitely see very real fear in his eyes. And I almost wonder if maybe in this moment he was thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I haven't been counting my 9 lives. Could this be my last one? Obviously, we don't know how many lives he's lost at this point, but it's safe to say that he's probably lost about 4 at this point. If I believe the canon death that was shown in the new short, the Trident, which is very good by the way, was number 5, and he would have had his first 4 deaths probably by this moment, because Kitty is obviously in the Trident, and if this is directly after the first movie, maybe like 1 or 2 weeks or something, then yeah, that would be the logical chain of events. But basically, he obviously didn't count his lives, as we can see in The Last Wish, and maybe he's kind of thinking that he might be down to his last one. If the Whisperer kills him, then he might be done. Like, he is very scared here, despite the Last Wish making us believe that that is the only time that he has feared death. But anyways, that is my crazily overcomplicated analysis of the 3 Diablos. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see y'all next time. Bye for now.